So in essence of Total Drama essentially being cancelled at this point, I think it's best to now start reflecting on the reboot seasons that we got and how refreshing they were after the terrible slump of Total Drama seasons that we were recently having. What's up everyone, this is Willie, and today I'm getting around to covering the video that I had just briefly mentioned in my last video, in that I will elaborate on the Total Drama Reboot and why I think it was a success with what we got with the seasons. So I'm going to run through different brief sections that dwell upon the necessities of the reboot's success. So let's get right to the get-go. The first aspect, the most integral to shaping the success of the reboot, is the cast, where Total Drama has been pretty decent with some of the cast members they have compete, where this group of people don't all come off as one-dimensional and actually have a lot more complexities to them in terms of their dynamic and characters that they're going to incorporate into the game of Total Drama. And furthermore, aside from the cast, it's also the fact that we at least get to know all of them within these two seasons, where even the ones who were booted in the first season got more time in the subsequent seasons. Someone like Caleb or Axel barely got much to do, but at least had more time to shine in season 2. And on top of that, with the complexities of the characters, I also like how they diversified them in terms of not only background but also their nature, where someone like Priya is a very determined personality, while others like Julia is like very cunning. And from these examples, they are among most of the archetypes that we don't really get to see on most Total Drama seasons. And especially when the reboot is made in the more modern era of animation, I think the show did a phenomenal job with producing the best we got from a modernized cast with some really good dynamic personalities with very complex characteristics to them too. Next up is the dynamic interactions between the characters, where also we had just dwelled upon the cast and the significance they have with what they bring to the table, and that leads into the next part, is the relationship that is established within these seasons, where I really like how much the reboot really focused on the relationship side of things, where we got to see some dynamics between characters that really added to the intrigue of the storytelling of the seasons, which I'll talk upon that soon. But for this sake, I enjoyed a lot of the dynamics that we got with these seasons, whether it be Julia and MK, where we pretty much got two antagonistic players uniting together. Someone like Priya and Millie, although felt kumbaya, at least felt a bit more compelling considering their inevitable fallout when we learned Millie secretly going against most of Priya's plans. We also got someone like Raj and Bowie, which was pretty surreal to see this romanticized relationship between the two. That was really cool. And I guess I can talk about Priya and Caleb, which I know is really mixed and most fans are kind of negative on it. I'm just like okay with it. It is very like overbearing, I should say, and definitely felt very contrived at points and could have had a bit more better closure to it. But oh well, that is at least a relationship worth talking about. So yeah, I really think that's what really elevates the reboot a lot, because we get a lot more focus on the relationships instead of the usual challenges that just drag out time before the elimination. Now, to be fair, I think season 2 does do something like that, where season 1 has more of a distinction to it since it does take time into the relationships more, so there's a valid point I want to make there. But anyways, the established relationships and interactions among these characters with much more intrigue and nuance that contribute to the theme and plot of the season, with much more higher intrigue to them and display such a huge impact on the plot of the seasons as well. Now moving on to the next part, which is obviously the storytelling, where season 1 in particular has pretty much a very consistent story that's established that fulfills its themes at the end, where I felt like the story theme of season 1 was all about determination, which is exactly in line with Priya's character, and for her to come out on top with that win does satisfyingly fulfill that. But it's not all about Priya, it's also about the other characters who also play the game with such determination, where I'm probably going to say that a lot, but the term of it is very well established this season, where it's really displayed among all the characters who showcase that. Even some earlier boosts like Nichelle, who was initially giving up in the challenge but then was determined to try and finish it, which I mean she couldn't, but at least it reflected on her determination. And the same goes for the likes of someone like Damien and Chase, I would say, Julia, Bowie. Like, the storytelling is really satisfying and the character arcs are developed alongside that. Also, I do think season 1 does a great job adding closure to it too, building more upon the satisfaction that the story of season 1 successfully did. So there's that. But then we go to season 2, which I will acknowledge. The theme of the season does kind of regress a bit, where it's very inconsistent all the way through, where I really narrowed down to the theme of the season being about revolution, where mostly the characters like MK, Julia, Wayne, Raj really embodied that. And because I can say it's just dumb, it really goes to show how this season really regressed a lot and lacked any sort of focus on like the interactions among these characters and played out in such a jumbled mess where I don't even think this is a solid theme to describe this season, but I only come to it because we see how the story played out in the pre-merge where the Team Skunkbutt were really slacking off in the challenges, but after MK and Julia and I guess Bowie's contribution to the cheating element adding to like the revolution aspect of shifting their losses to wins by any means necessary to their own right. And for Rain Raj's role to that was that obviously they were really repulsed by the cheating, so they held quite a revolt towards MK and Julia, and in the end of it, Wayne would be one to come out on top and win that respective season, succeeding his own uprising against the cheating, playing into the overall revolution theme, but also feels like a win that kind of left me perplexed considering the show didn't really want to make us side with Wayne and Raj, which to be fair can add to the more shock element when the former ended up winning, but he didn't get much substance to really make the audience feel like we should be siding with him. Just kind of feels a bit underwhelming with how his win is. Not that he's a bad player, it's more so how he was written and edited, where he was seemingly portrayed to be the one in the wrong from a more storytelling perspective, where there wasn't much essence to his character that made him feel like he was going to be the hero that overcame the players who participated in the cheating. So in my opinion, if Wayne were to be a more satisfying winner from a storytelling perspective, the show should have put in more effort to portray him as he was on the right for more so the audience would be on his side in this instance, and then for him to have a bit more development for the remainder of the season and be the one to actually get the better of his opponents, then I feel like there would be more satisfaction with his achievement. So yeah, season 2 may not have the greatest storytelling and consistent theme to really make a good closure to the season, but I think it really outmatches most of the storytelling from the previous seasons like Pocket 2 Island, All-Stars, and even in my opinion, Revenge of the Island. So yeah. And finally, we got the season structures, where obviously both reboot seasons got 13 episodes each, so the structuring of the episodes would at least have one elimination episode each, with at least having one that necessitates for a double elimination, since a final 3 for some reason is needed in the finale episode. Where although the pacing does seem rushed, and obviously the episode count being half of the amount of the original Total Drama Island, which fairly reasonable considering the shorter amount of cast members. So the shorter amount of episodes don't really hurt the pacing of the seasons, but I do wish that there was at least an extension of episodes so that there will be at least one elimination each time, not just having one random double elimination in the middle of this season. And preferably, I would like to have at least a finale that only focuses on the final 2, since a final 3 or in the inclusion of a final 3 elimination just feels so out of touch with how Total Drama was usually produced as. And I'm not trying to theorize too much, but considering Total Drama is based off the Survivor reality show, and when producing the reboot seasons, they're obviously made while modern Survivor has now been going with final 3s moving forward. So I guess they wanted to try and adapt to that concept in the show, which, okay I guess, but does it really work for Total Drama on their own rights? Not really. But anyways, besides these minor nitpicks that I want to pick, I think the structure of the seasons were pretty okay. While like I mentioned, season 1 was definitely obviously stronger since the season doesn't really slow down the pacing and it's compelling all the way through, while season 2 is just a regression from that, where it stays in line with the season 1 pacing for a bit, but then after the post-merge, it just drags out and puts way too much focus on the challenges than the player interactions for us to actually care who the boot is, considering there's no consistent setup sequence before the elimination. But oh well, I still feel like there was some merit to its first half that elevated more so than any of the previous 3 seasons before the reboots. And I personally believe even though the short amount of episodes we got still worked to success no matter how rushed it came off as. So that wraps up everything about why I think the reboots of Total Drama were an incredible success. And just for the essence of it, the cast who participated in the reboots each had something to bring to the table in the stretch of 2 seasons and had such diverse personalities that made things more interesting with how the roles are going to contribute to the season, which that leads to the strong dynamic relationships we got, where they stand out a lot from the reboots and contribute a big impact on the plots of the respective seasons, which further develops them. And that's all encompassed with the storytelling of the seasons and how characters are intended to be portrayed to fit in with the theme of the seasons, in that it is pretty well balanced for most of the characters, but then some of them are shafted from screen time simply because they're not relevant to the story of the season. And this all culminates with the structure of the seasons, where they may be rushed and short, but the show did the best they can to produce such thrilling episodes that actually succeeded our anticipations of the shows, which is such a great rebound after the likes of the previous few Total Drama seasons, which weren't held in high regards in terms of how it was received. So I would say both the reboot seasons together were really something fresh that worked out greatly. Although despite its flaws, which season 2 definitely has most of those, I still think these seasons and the cast played out much better for how we desired. So with that culminates everything I've got to say for this video, and I appreciate you all tuning in for me talking about the Total Drama Reboot and dwell upon the aspects that shaped how good the reboots were, and I'll make more Total Drama content moving forward, even some retrospectives soon, which will be in a few years. But anyways, that's that, and I'll see you in another video.